One night and one more time. Thanks for the memories. Thanks for the memories. Tastes like you, but sweeter. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, the podcast where Matt and Todd go see a movie at our local Regal cinema, and then we talk about it in the parking lot after the movie's over. We give our fresh take, fresh thoughts, fresh ideas to you, the listeners, and hopefully that helps you decide, should you see this movie? We're back after about a week hiatus because someone went on vacation, and then the other person just sat around and didn't do anything. I am Todd Domer.
And I'm Matt Malloy, and I was the one who went on the week vacation, and it was lovely. But we're not here to talk about my vacation. We're here to talk about a movie, and that movie is called Remembrance.
No.
Reminiscence.
There it is.
Dang it. Scrap this, start over. No, we'll carry on. It's really called Reminiscence, and it deals with a lot about memories.
Yes.
As you may have guessed from Todd's intro, which was about memories also.
Yes.
So,
Fallout Boy. Thanks for the memories.
Fallout Boy. And so this movie stars Hugh Jackman, famous for many roles, and I didn't recognize anyone else. But I'm sure you did, Todd.
I did. There is a couple people who I recognize.
Yes.
Rebecca Ferguson, who's kind of like the other main girl in this movie, the mystery girl.
Mm-hmm.
She's been in several stuff. She's been in the Mission Impossible movies. She was also in Dr. Sleep. She was the leader of the, I don't know, gypsies? I don't know what you would call them. And then Thandiwe Newton.
Oh, yeah. That name sounds familiar to me.
Yeah, she's been in a whole bunch of stuff. She was in Crash and Westworld and Mission Impossible 2, Pursuit of Happiness. So she's pretty... she's been around. And then, let's see, Cliff Curtis is the other one who I recognize. He has been in a ton of stuff. He was also in Dr. Sleep. Really, it would have been a Dr. Sleep reunion if Ewan McGregor was in this movie.
Right.
And honestly, just a whole bunch of stuff. He was in The Meg, he was in Hobbs and Shaw. Just a ton of different side stuff. And that's pretty much all. A couple other people who I was like, hey, that guy looks familiar, but they weren't in the movie enough for me to really care about looking up their name. So,
Grand.
that's where I'm at.
Okay, well, so that will take us down the road of what was this movie about, which is, this movie is set in the future, specifically in a future where the oceans have risen and kind of put a lot of coastal cities underwater. Namely, in this movie, Miami and New Orleans are both kind of at least partially underwater. And so, interesting little world building thing there. Most people ride around in boats to get from one place to another, and it's almost like a Venice Canal situation. And also, I guess the Earth has gotten hot enough in this future that most people operate at night, not in the daytime. So
I do have to admit that even though they specified that rule, there are plenty of people doing stuff in the daytime.
Correct.
Through this movie. That was a thing.
Yeah. And the other thing that they have that we don't really have today is this machine, which Hugh Jackman's character has one of, that can it can sort of help you replay your memories. It's like a guided thing where Hugh Jackman's voice leads you down the road to remember certain aspects and memories. of your life, and also they appear on a 3D projection that he can also watch, which is kind of weird, but that's how it works.
Yeah.
And so the actual plot of the movie is you get this setup where he's doing this thing and he has a partner, and they like make money off of having people interact with their memories. And then a woman comes in, and she's very intriguing to Hugh Jackman's character, and they end up starting a relationship, and then she disappears. And so the rest of the movie is kind of this mystery of where is she, what happened to her. She disappears without kind of any notice or anything like that. And so he goes on this hunt through using the machine for various people, looking at memories and stuff like that throughout the movie, and eventually unravels the mystery of what happened to her and what happened to some other pieces of plot that I won't reveal, but he figures out why she came into his life and why she left. So that's kind of it. You've got a mystery in the future, an alternate reality, with some sci-fi elements thrown in. So, what did you think of this movie, Todd?
So this movie is very interesting to me. It's like a somewhat futuristic sci-fi movie / honestly, like taking back to like a Private Eye 1950s mystery movie. Like, it's like there's different elements that like are mashed together to make this movie, and I feel like that created this war in my mind while I was watching the movie, where the mystery aspect of all of this, I found myself being very intrigued, like a mystery can do. I'm trying to guess what's going on, and I've got several theories working, and so in that aspect I was very much drawn into this movie. The war in my mind was that I disliked all the sci-fi in this movie. Like, I feel like if they took the sci-fi out, you would have had yourself a very kind of almost, maybe we just haven't had one in a while, but like almost like a noir mystery. Like, I found myself while we were watching the movie wishing that was the type of movie I was watching. And I think it's because I don't know if I'm a harsh critic of sci-fi, but I almost feel like it's hard for me to relate to sci-fi movies when the sci-fi of one movie is one specific machine or something that doesn't exist now that they kind of throw out there, but then it seems like there's no other good advancement in technology, period, which is what this movie's kind of like. Everything's, and I mean, I think there's a purpose in that too, in saying that the newest trend is for people to search their memories because the future's so bleak and there's not a whole lot to hang on to. But I also don't feel like they really fleshed out the science and what the machine actually does and how, like, they tried in different areas to like explain it, but then like I had plenty of questions. Like, when Hugh Jackman is watching people's memories, it's not, I don't understand how it's a full-fledged, it's almost like he's watching a TV of watching a movie, where if you're watching the person's memories, you should just be watching through their point of view, which they have that aspect happen in one of the times he's interrogating person. Like, all the memories you see from this guy are in first person point of view, but then all the memories in other times are like full on extrapolated and like big scenery and stuff like that. And I'm like, how did you get this with the way this machine works? And it just doesn't go in deep enough. Also, like I pointed fun out in the beginning when you were talking, where it's like they make a point to say, okay, everyone retreats inside during the day because it's too hot. But then they had a lot of scenes where people were hanging out outside during the day, and they always try to say, oh, the sun's going down. But some of it doesn't seem like the sun's going down. It seems pretty much well in the sky to me. And so I just think when you have sci-fi movies that kind of are setting up rules and stuff like that. When you don't follow the rules, it's just hard for me to care at that point. Like, you set up rules, but then you don't follow them. So I think that the sci-fi and that stuff, to me, was the bad aspect of this movie. The mystery itself is interesting. I thought there were some pretty strong performances in this movie. Like, I don't feel like really anyone was, like, bad at what they did in this movie. I think Hugh Jackman... It's hard for me for Hugh Jackman because he still acts like Wolverine in movies to me. Like, he grunts a lot, and when he's fighting, he's always making that like Wolverine sounds and stuff like that from the movies. So that's all I thought about. But then, what's her name? The Ferguson mystery woman. I think she does a good job. And then the other woman who's like Hugh Jackman's right-hand woman, kind of, I think she does a good job too. I don't think it's all any of it. None of it's stellar to me, but it's all good when it comes to acting. So I mean, there's some good kind of very scenic cinematography shots of, like, you know, Miami underwater basically, but then in the same shots you see like these buildings that are basically being sunk into the water and the electricity still works and stuff like that, and I'm like, well, how does that work? Like, with the electricity still going on, it's all running through water, which seems like for a desolate place there needs to be a lot of safety precautions for that to happen. And I don't know, I found myself getting lost and wondering all of that. So
right.
The mystery really engaged me, so that's good. The sci-fi kind of also took me out. So I had this war going on in my mind the entire movie. So I also, and I'm not going to explain it because it would definitely be a spoiler, I wasn't a fan of the end, and I feel like I definitely, about halfway through the movie, really kind of pinpointed where I felt this movie was going to end, and it did exactly that, and I kind of just thought it was not a good turn for the movie. But anyway, I think that's me. Like, I think this movie is good at many levels, even though there are areas where I think it wasn't good. So if you're down for a good mystery and stuff like that, I feel like as far as a mystery movie goes, this movie kind of checks the boxes of that, the engaging story and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, go see this movie. It's got some pretty good shots and stuff like that probably are enhanced on the big screen. So this is a fine movie, I think, to see in the theaters. However, you know, if you're kind of leaning towards, what Todd said about sci-fi and stuff like that, I don't know, that kind of sounds like how I would judge a movie or whatever, then watch it on HBO Max, because that's where it's at. So, that's me. Matt, what did you think about this movie? Were you waiting for Hugh Jackman to pop Wolverine claws every second? Because that's how I was doing, but...
I was waiting for him to burst into song, a la Greatest Showman.
And the woman who's the mystery woman, she's also in The Greatest Showman.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
Also a little Greatest Showman reunion.
Yeah.
For those of people who enjoy that movie.
Have you watched it yet, Todd?
The Greatest Showman?
We've talked about this on the podcast before.
That I haven't watched
You haven't watched it.
I'm pretty positive sometime in July, my daughter really wanted to watch it, and so I watched most of it. I can't say that I sat through all of it. But honestly, it's hard for me to go back and watch that movie because I've read a lot of articles about how P.T. Barnum really was and like all the stuff that he kind of did, and so like the movie really makes him out to be really great when in real life he kind of wasn't. So hard for me to get out of my mind for that one. But I have watched most of it, which is why I know that the mystery woman was in it.
Gotcha.
She was the singer that he tried to put on real shows for or whatever.
Right.
Not freak shows.
Right. Okay. Little Greatest Showman tangent. Maybe one day we'll review it for real.
Maybe. You never know.
You never know what could happen.
Maybe one day we'll even take requests.
Maybe.
But not today, so don't send anything in.
Right. All right. So my thoughts on the movie. I'm gonna. You talked about two different areas: the mystery and the sci-fi. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna slice it a little finer, even.
Okay.
I'm gonna separate it into the world building that was created. You know, you've got this world that the waves have risen, the temperature has risen. and how do people live in that environment. You've got the sci-fi part of it, which I think is just the machine, basically.
Yeah,
I
honestly.
think there's some drugs that we don't have today, but okay.
Yeah.
And
Also, one drug that you learned that no one ever kicks, but then someone did kick. So it's like, what was
Right.
the point of that information?
right. And then you've got the mystery, which
Yeah.
is, you covered that pretty well. And I'm going to say I was really intrigued by the world building that took place. There are some interesting shots of like sunken cities and trains sliding along on top of the water on a track,
Yeah.
and people in boats and stuff like that. And that was all kind of interesting to think about, like, oh, what would happen if the sea level rose a certain amount and stuff like that.
And there are parts of the city that are like, the streets are still intact, but it's covered by like an inch of water and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
so a lot of those things, yeah. I mean, it was all very interesting for sure.
Yeah. So that was a positive. I'm kind of with you on the sci-fi aspect. I felt like they didn't follow their own rules as closely as they should have.
Yeah.
And they even tried to explain the big problem you had with the being in first person for a memory, and then sometimes it's not.
Right.
They tried to explain that, but the explanation was dumb.
Yeah.
And I call a failure on that. So,
The big F word.
yeah, failure. The mystery part of it, I liked probably the second half of the mystery as things were starting to sort of come into focus.
Yeah.
The first half I found kind of boring,
Yes.
as they were laying out the different pieces that would later come together. I didn't care about any of the characters at that point. I thought they were all jerks. And I guess maybe the point of that was all the people had their flaws, but that caused me to not really engage with them as much as I would if I was like, oh, there's a sympathetic something here that I wanna unravel and find out about. No, at the beginning it was like, oh, these are flawed people with no redeeming qualities, and I don't care.
But there's also a point where, like, so the story, which not to do like spoilers, is that, the woman comes in for this memory session or whatever, and then her and Hugh Jackman kind of start a romance, and then after a couple months she just flat out disappears.
Right.
So, all he's doing is to dig up, why does she disappear? What happened to her? Stuff like that. And there's a point in the movie where he finds that out without much like information beyond that. Like he finds out what happened to her, why she did what she did, and stuff like that. And I was like, well, why doesn't this stop here? Like once he found that out, I was like, what's still going on here? Like, why are you so driven in this once your answers or your questions are answered? Like
Right.
I was like, that's I don't really get why you're still going.
Yeah.
And there's no point where he explains why he's still going. He's just still going.
Yeah. I think there's one part where he's like, well, this happened and it's bad, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
But it you don't buy it, really. It's
Yeah, because all the questions have pretty much been answered. And then they had to introduce new questions in the mystery
right.
to kind of keep it going. And it's like, okay, well, that's not as tight as you want it, even though we're still kind of engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, to use Hollywood terminology, they were laying a lot of pipe through like the first half, if not more, of this movie. Once they started to feed stuff through that pipe, you're like, yeah, all right, let's go. But a lot of pipe laying.
Is that Hollywood terminology?
I'm almost positive.
Okay.
I heard it in a show.
I trust you, Todd.
Yeah.
I trust you.
I mean, I guess laying pipe could also be a different terminology for something else. But
Well,
I prefaced it by saying Hollywood terms.
Right. Okay. So, where do I land overall on this? I would say I kind of land with you had 1.5 out of the 3 elements that I laid out. Like the mystery, I got into it eventually, but the beginning was not good. The world building, good. I was interested in that and what happened. I wasn't prevalent in every single scene, but they did a nice job of kind of keeping to the same aesthetic throughout the movie. There was always water around, and
Sure.
people tromping through like this inch of water, or driving cars on wet, slippery roads and stuff like that. So I would say you could see this. If you're going to see it, maybe see it in the theater, due to some of the cinematography stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent about it, I think, and yeah, I would say I could take it or leave it. I think that's where I'd land, and just say, yeah, there's probably no reason to see it in the theater. Probably wait and see it on your streaming service, or don't see it at all.
That's fair.
You'll be fine. So
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have HBO Max, then that's a harder decision for you to make.
true.
If you have HBO Max, then the power's at your fingertips.
That's right.
Even though we support movie theaters here.
Yeah, we do. We were the only ones in the movie theater tonight seeing this movie.
Yeah. I mean, it is a Monday night, but
Yeah.
also it's like this movie just dropped too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's where I'll leave it.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Matt, how many how many white houses on stilts in the middle of the ocean would you give this movie? Which that house comes into play at some point, and it was just so hard for me to believe this house existed. But because they definitely make the point to say it's like nowhere near land, it's like out in the middle of nowhere. So it's like, how did this house get built?
Right.
So obviously 5 being the best, because then you got 5 houses you can slip between the 2 and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
have a maximum amount of parties. 0 houses is the worst, because then you don't have a house and you're just in the ocean. You got nothing going on. So
Fair points all. I'm gonna say that out of 5 houses, white houses on stilts in the middle of the ocean, I'm gonna give this a 2.5. I'm gonna say this is a pretty average movie when you average out all the flaws, the pluses, the minuses. I'm gonna land right smack dab in the middle of our rating system and say average movie, and you can skip if you want.
So going into the movie, I was telling you, Matt, that I had a feeling this movie was not gonna be that good, because it really felt like this movie got no publicity except for this final week before it came out. Like, and to me, that typically means that they know that they don't have a blockbuster on their hands, so they just kind of reduce the budget of showing this movie and stuff like that. So, I guess with that in my mind, the movie was better than I thought it was going to be, but that doesn't make it a good movie. Like, I was already expecting it was going to be bad because of the reasons that I already stated. So, but to its credit, I will say that I was pretty engaged in the mystery, even though I disliked the sci-fi aspect of it. And using the soda test, I still had soda by the end of this movie, which says something.
An
about
endorsement
this movie.
from the soda test.
Yeah. So I'm not far from you, but I'm going to go a little farther up. I think I'm going to be at 2.7. I agree that this is a pretty average movie, but it did, to its credit, you know, once things started popping off, I was pretty sucked into the mystery, really trying to figure out where we were going, putting my detective hat on and being like, okay, so this is what I think is going to happen, this is blah, 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 you know, like, I'm trying to connect the dots. And if a movie can do that, get me far enough into it to an extent, that I'm going to give it slightly an above average reading. So, that's where I'm at. What did I say, 2.7?
2.7.
2.7
2.7 white houses on stilts in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah. One
that.
still being built. So I don't think anyone could sleep at it, but maybe there's a dock just there that people
Yeah.
can party on.
Yeah.
So I can have 2.5 parties.
Yeah. Great. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, where we reviewed the movie Reminiscence. I almost said Remembrance again. It's Reminiscence.
Yeah.
And we gave it an average rating of 2.6 White Houses on Stilts in the Middle of the Ocean out of 5, which is slightly above average, so watch it if you want to. We don't give it a strong endorsement, but there were parts of it we liked. Hugh Jackman's acting, I didn't mention, but I'd like to because I know Hugh's a listener.
Sure.
It was
yeah,
right
absolutely.
on. Right
Yeah.
on, Hugh. Good job.
Good job.
And thank you all listeners for listening to our podcast, continuing to do it. We're approaching our 2-year anniversary of doing this. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. October.
Yeah, okay.
It's
We
definitely
still got a couple
October, and
months
it
then.
was Joker.
Yeah, right.
So
All right. So we're approaching it, but we haven't it's not quite in sight yet.
well, we have passed 6,000 downloads, though. I think
We
that's
have.
that
Okay.
milestone
Beautiful.
come down the pipe.
We love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep on listening, keep on downloading. We'll keep making these, and we'll see you next time.
Da 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 da
Da da
da da da.
da da da.